What's up, everybody? I'm Whiskey Mo, otherwise known as Morgan Houston. I'm one of the moderators at the Air Force Special Warfare Discord server. Also, I run the Air Force Special Warfare History Instagram page. For those of you who are interested, this video is about military benefits that you can look forward to getting when you join. Just kind of an informational piece. We are not financial advisors. We are not any kind of benefits advisors. So just please be forewarned that that's the case. But this is for all of you out there who missed the conversation the other night, and we hope that you get something from this. Enjoy. Here we go. Okay, guys, so we're recording. I know that this doesn't seem super official, but just so everyone knows, my name's Morgan Houston. I am kind of the old head here, but tonight we're going to be doing some military benefits talk with Montana and Sigurd, and I will roll it over to you guys. Go.
Hello. I am Montana, and we're just going to go over some of the regular benefits that you may or may not be aware that you have access to as a service member, including but not limited to things such as a TSP, which I believe Sigurd is going to go more into, which is your thrift savings plan. And I'm going to be looking more towards things like education benefits, tuitions assistance, and things like the Service Member Civil Relief Act and your SGLI. So some of the first things that you'll be interacting with when you enlist or commission, going through your initial entry training and in processing, they're going to ask you to start setting up your service members group life insurance policy, which that's something that sounds kind of morbid, but it is a good piece of security for your family members. And now it's recently got bumped up from, instead of being at $400,000, now max benefit is at $500,000. There's also an additional amount that goes in to cover funerary costs. So if anything happens to you in a training environment or a deployment, your family will have some level of survivorship benefits. There are lower amounts that you can sign up for, but I would wholly recommend just doing the max amount, as it's only about $30 out of your check every month.
I believe the lowest amount is like 50,000.
Yeah. It's really worth it to just, in my opinion, just max it out. It costs you next to nothing, and worst thing happens, your family will have more taken care of for you. Going from there, another common thing that you're going to need to set up is deciding which kind of GI Bill you want. There's the Montgomery GI Bill and the post 9/11 GI Bill. Montgomery GI Bill will also pay a stipend into technical training, same thing with post 9/11, but they work kind of differently. And I think Foxtrot here has interacted more with the tuition assistance side of things, but I don't know if you've interacted as much with the GI Bill side.
If you don't mind, let me roll in on that one, because I used all the educational assistance you can. Always go with the post 9/11 GI Bill if you can, because the Montgomery GI Bill, what that does is it only gives you a set amount of money per month that's paid to you. So you are still responsible for ensuring that your tuition is paid through that money. With the post 9/11 GI Bill, the money is paid directly to the school, if I'm remembering correctly, and then you also get a stipend to live on. So like for me, I didn't realize that I could switch from the post 9/11 to the Montgomery, so I had the Montgomery GI Bill. So I still accrued debt, but I used the GI Bill to live off of. That way I didn't have to work my last 2 years of college. And then there is also another program that you can use once you get out through the VA called, they've changed the name, but it's basically, it's for if you have a disability rating of 10%, and you can use it for like trade schools. I used it for my master's degree, so there's all kinds of things like that. There's a ton of educational assistance.
Yes, and the GI Bills are transferable to dependents, so like a spouse or child, if you end up not using it, you can transfer it to one of them. And on top of that, your post 9/11, correct me if I'm wrong, Whiskey, on this, but your stipend does come from like a BAH cost, calculated from the BAH cost for the area that you're attending school in.
And it's also adjusted to the highest amount of tuition that you can reasonably be accepted into. So like when I was going to school in Denver, it was the University of Denver was the highest tuition. So that is what a lot of that money is based off of as well.
And on top of that, universities participating in the Yellow Ribbon program, which is mainly going to be looking at high tuition cost private universities, will generally cover the gap between the amount covered by the GI Bill and the actual tuition cost at said university. And there's also a little bit of a kicker for purchasing things like textbooks and course access, as those tend to be necessary for attending schools. Sorry, give me a second. But for while you're in service, there is also tuition assistance, which can be accessed through various portals. Like in the Army, it's Ignite Ed, which is a weird phrase, where you're allocated a certain amount of money that you can take per semester hour per. It's usually measured by semester hour, but in practicality, when you're at active duty, most of your classes you'll be taking are going to be in a weird format of quarter hours, where you fit more classes in a year, but they don't count for as much as full-length semester hour courses. And those are generally covered by tuition assistance. There is a cap on how many you can take. There is a cap on which ones you can take, and it doesn't cover getting your pilot's license, for example. That will be covered by credentialing assistance, which covers the cost of taking credentialing tests. So things like ASE certifications if you're a mechanic, or flight tests for being a pilot. And the amounts on there are generally subject to change, but you can pull it up from the individual websites for your particular service school. I wholly recommend not being the person to take like 3 classes at a time, because as an active duty service member, you're frequently working 50, 60 plus hour weeks, and you will not have the time to be able to sleep, study, and do everything that you need to do and your job at the same time. I would recommend starting with 1 and then going from there. Also, paying attention to what your course load looks like. For example, do not mix taking organic chemistry and anatomy and physiology, because chances are you don't have the time to adequately study for both, and your grades will suffer. It's designed so that you're not basically a full-time student while active duty. You're limited on how many that you can take before having to draw from your own pocket. That way, it discourages you from overloading yourself. All right, so that's pretty much tuition assistance and regular and your GI Bill covered right there. Sigurd, are you ready for TSP?
Yeah, I'm all.
Or do you want me to continue?
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, or do you want me to continue with the Service Member Civil Relief Act and the other?
Well, you can go ahead and finish yours, but one thing I do want to add, for those who aren't aware, not every basis education and training is going to be the most helpful. A lot of them sometimes will just be like, just do A, B, C, D, and then you do it, and then you're like, okay, well, now what do I do in order to enroll? And they'll be like, well, you figure it out. If that ends up being the case, it shouldn't happen, but unfortunately it does. If that does end up being your case, talk to your supervisor, talk to people around like your shop, your workplace. You're not the only person who's trying to go through school or has gone through school. The answers are out there. So if education and training isn't able to provide the answers that you need, someone within your chain definitely can.
Absolutely. And also don't be afraid to reach out, because you might get in a situation like some of the people in my unit are, where they may not know some of these things, and education center might not always be able to help them out, but chances are there are people in your unit within your footprint that have been to college, or at least have an idea of what classes to pair up with what, or can network and find you people who can get you answers on that. I guess while I'm at it, I might as well cover the USERA, which covers it's the Uniformed Service Employment and Reemployment Rights Act. So if you enter a period of armed service, your job position can be held for you for a period of, I believe, up to 3 years. And you can frequently come back with seniority that would have been gained during that time of armed service. So if you're a guardsman, or if you're a active duty service member, or you're enlisting for active duty service, You end up going through it. You had a career before the armed forces. You enlist or you commission. You serve a period of 2-3 years and decide that it's not for you. You can return to your position. You should be able to return really no problem. And on top of that, there's also the Service Member Civil Relief Act, which caps the amount of interest on loans, and I think it's loans and debts occurred before armed service, caps them to 6% on interest rates, and gives you the ability to terminate leases in the event of you needing to relocate for work on orders.
Something to recognize when it comes to the lease points there, gentlemen, is the fact that landlords can be fucking shady. So you need to know your rights in the law, because they will fight you tooth and nail to ensure that you do not get your rights, because they want to make sure that they're squeezing every penny out of you. So when you get the opportunity, make sure you're asking people in your chain, your local JAG or defense office, to ensure that you know exactly what you are allowed by your rights by law.
Absolutely. I've had an issue with this myself, where when I was going into armed service, I had to break a lease. And said landlord was like, okay, cool. You owe me the rest of the lease until the end date. On top of that, I'm keeping your deposit. Not allowed to do that. Came in with orders, came in with legal. All that was pretty much able to be dismissed, but you need to be ready to fight for what you're entitled to. Is a phrase that I was told before joining the Army was, the Army will take everything it can from you. Make sure you can get everything you can from it. Mm-hmm. These benefits are things that it's not a burden to ask for, because you are entitled to it by swearing in, by putting on that uniform, by taking the oath of enlistment, and you are functionally owed those from your service. So take advantage of the resources that you have for that, please. It's doing yourself a favor and arguably doing the country a favor by taking care of its soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and Guardians. And I think that's it for this right now. Sigurd, you ready?
Yep. Let me get this figured out. What the heck just happened here? Hang on.
All
right. So I'm going to be going over TSP, or the Thrift Savings Plan. I'm going to switch it to video for a moment. But I do want to clarify, I'm not finance. I am not a financial expert. I have zero accreditation in financial anythings. All I'm doing is simply saying TSP exists. This is known as the blended retirement system for those in the military. It's for those not in, this is basically your 401k. Going to go over the different types of plans. Super brief summary of it all. And then I'll go over the differences of it. And then that's pretty much it. But if you have further questions and stuff after that, for those who are in the Air Force, you should be able to go into My Pay, I believe, and find all the answers that you'll have from there, or your local finance office. And then for those who are coming in, that'll be dealt with once you're actually in at a BMT or your officer school training, and you should be able to take care of everything from there. So without further ado, I will switch it to video. I think. Hang on. Uh-oh.
Make sure you're hitting that square. There we go. We got it.
Okay, there we go. All right. Thrift Savings Plan. TSP made easy. What is it and why is it important? So this binder I made for my unit for all new people coming in to kind of help them, the new airmen, so this way they can have a little bit of an understanding. I am going to read this little blurb here, but I'll be super quick about it. The Thrift Savings Plan, just a brief summary of what it is. The DoD will automatically contribute an amount equal to 1% of a service member's active duty basic pay to their TSP, beginning 60 days after they've entered active duty, and continue through their 26th year of service. In addition, after a service member's second full year of service, the DoD will match the service member's voluntary contributions to their TSP accounts up to an additional 4%, bringing the total DoD automatic matching contributions to 5% of their basic pay. Service members are fully vested in or entitled to their TSP accounts after the completion of 2 years of service. And no automatic contributions and service matching begins immediately for those who have opted in. So if you didn't quite catch that, once you enter the service, you're getting 1% starting 60 days into your retirement plan. And that's going to run through your 26 year of service or whenever you get out, whichever's sooner. And then once you hit 2 years, the DoD is going to bump that to 5% automatic of your basic pay. And then you are also able to enter your TSP, make an account, and then change the fund type, change your matching contribution, for however much of your basic pay you want to do. So my suggestion is go ahead and make your basic pay that you're putting into TSP 5%, and the government's going to match that exact 5%. So you're going to have 10% going in your TSP. But if you do 6%, 7%, anything above 6% of your basic pay into your TSP, the DoD will not match any higher than 5%. So if you do 6%, DoD is going to give you 5% still, so you're going to have 11% going into your TSP. What you will automatically be enrolled in is something called the L funds. So what this is I don't know if you guys can see it, but these are projected retirement years. So the L fund is based off of investments into all the other funds and in accordance with when you are projected to retire. Now, at the time of my printing of this binder and getting everything off TSP, this is accurate as of December 31st, 2021. So, but this is the most accurate thing I've gotten, and I actually just made this binder maybe 6 months ago. So bear in mind that as you guys come in, once your 2 years start passing, it'll probably change. But just give a little bit of pie graphing charts. This is just how each of the L fund is invested as of January 1st, 2022. And this is just kind of going into little differences between your different retirements all here. And then the efficiency frontier. My opinion with this is once you hit your 2 years, start really detailing it and see if L fund truly is right for you. Me personally, I don't think the L fund is the best fund. I think a mix of different funds for how I want it to be percented, percented, I guess is the word, is what I went with. So L fund will say, well, you're going to have 10% in this, 10% in this fund, 10% in this fund, 10% here, 30% here, so on. And once I was able to look into it, I changed it all. But going from there, it's going to be all the different funds from here. So we have our C fund, S fund, I fund, F fund, and G fund. Your C fund is your common stock index. What it is, it's a fund containing stocks of large and medium-sized U.S. companies, so people like Apple, Amazon, Walmart, and all that. There's a potential for high investment returns in the long term, and with all investment stuff, it obviously can depend upon the market, and there's always a risk with any kind of trading. Your S fund is your small capitalization stock index fund. So this is stocks in small to medium-sized U.S. companies. And the difference here is your S fund runs off of your Dow Jones, whereas your C fund runs off of your S&P 500. There's potential for high investment returns over the long term. Your I fund is your international stock index investment fund. So as it says, it's funds and stocks into more than 20 developed countries and the companies that are within those countries. It's based off the MSCI EAFE stock index. And just with the other two, there's potential for high investment returns over the long term. The difference between the I fund and these two, however, obviously, other than this is international, the return is also dependent upon the value of the U.S. dollar. As you guys may know, the yen has surpassed the U.S. dollar in Russia, so probably our value here in this fund just recently went lower for its return. That's something that's world market economy stuff that you would have to keep track of if you believe iFund is for you. Your F fund, fixed income index investment fund. So this is a fund containing government and corporate asset-backed bonds. So basically Barclays Capital US aggregate bond index may earn returns that are higher than money market funds over the long term with relatively low risk. Big word may right there, so remember that. But the risk is the bond prices fall when interest rates rise, and bonds may be repaid early, reducing your returns. So we'll go into a little more of what does that mean in English a little later. And then your G fund is government securities investment fund, fund containing government securities. They're specific to the TSP. They do not lose money and has a consistent but relatively low investment return. Your money, and then the risk for that is your money may not grow enough to meet the retirement needs or outpace inflation. So basically, the G fund is just going to be like a steady increase. But if inflation just like skyrockets, or you decide you're going to retire early, if you just do 100% in your G fund, the retirement fund that you'll have to pull out of may not be what is required to basically live off your retirement. So you'll be retired, but from the military. Going into the G fund, getting that a little more in depth, as you guys can see. So this gray one is the rate of inflation, about 250. The G fund, since its inception, has run about just under $500. In this graph here, obviously you can see the return has been pretty well. So the G fund is doing pretty well. And as I just went over, you are going to get some returns. Just keep in mind it may not be enough for what you are wanting or what you think you need when retirement comes if you decide to do 100% into this. And then just some facts about the G fund, and obviously just some more graphs that honestly, again, because I'm not a financial expert, I can't explain in financial terms, but I know that this orange brown is the G fund and has stayed above the gray. And I do know that that is a good thing. From what I was able to read, I just unfortunately cannot speak finance to describe what that means. So I do apologize, sir. Going into the F fund, from the chart here, again, we got inflation going about 242, and the F fund is returning about 709. So it's doing pretty well for that. But obviously, as we can see, there's risk with that. Right here, we got, you're paying it back and you're paying it back. And then very small reward, almost no reward. Then we had some pretty big reward right here for the F fund. And then, little pie graph on what's going on with the F fund as well. So credit, securitized, and government-related assets. Moving on to the I fund, for your international fund. So again, we got another graph. Inflation has stayed pretty steady, about 159. And then, as we can see, the I fund's been kind of all over, kind of ending pretty much right at 300. And again, because market value and value of the US dollar, we can see that there's both returns and almost equal amount of not so much returns. So just keep that in mind if you believe iFund is good for you. But going over the different countries, percentage of holdings in each country, and then how many companies of each country the iFund invest in. So Australia and the Far East, and of course Europe right here, and then of course a whole bunch of verbiage on all that. Your S fund, again, your small capitalized stock funds. So this is your medium to small companies. The growth of $100, inflation's gone to about 159. Your S fund has gone to about 765. So that's doing pretty good. However, again, with anything, there is some risk to that. We're doing mostly good in terms of the return. However, we see there's some where we didn't do too hot and then just a little bit of return. And for clarity, all of these graphs I've been showing you is the year 2012 to 2021. So I do apologize I didn't say that earlier. And then this is just some of the stuff that the S fund is invested in. So we have utilities, technology, financials, industrials, healthcare, consumer services, consumer goods, basic materials, oil and gas, and about the percentage into each that's invested in. And then lastly, your C fund. Your C fund. So this is your big companies like Apple, Amazon, all them. So the growth of $100 since its inception. So inflation's been way down here, going about 242, whereas the fund itself has returned 3,856. So obviously that's huge, so huge, right? And you're probably thinking like, holy crap, why would I not do just 100% in C fund? That sounds amazing. $100 into 3,000, almost 4,000. Well, look at the graph. You see here we have mostly pretty good returns, but we do have a year where we did not great at all and then very low returns. So keep in mind, just with anything and investments in trading, even though that number looks amazing, the numbers really don't lie. This is just the end result and current as of December 31st, 2021. As we can see over a few years, that's not always the case. And then, of course, it goes just like the last one, goes into all the different things for the S&P 500 that's invested in, utilities, industrials, financials, and a whole bunch of other stuff here. So then, to close it all off, for the differences, try and make it a little easier to explain. Let me just find it. So now a comparison of all the TSP funds in super overview English, because we are not financial experts and there's a lot of lingo in there that probably a lot of us will never be able to understand without a financial advisor explaining it. So we're going to go with the G fund all the way down to the L fund. What it's invested in, its objective, what the risk it is subject to, the level of risk or volatility, and then the types of earnings it has, and then the inception date. Honestly, that doesn't really matter to any of us. But the G fund is government securities specific to the TSP. Its objective is interest income without the risk of loss of principal. It is subject to inflation risk. The risk level is low, and the types of earnings is interest earning. Your F fund is government, corporate, and mortgage-backed bonds. Its purpose is to match the performance of the Bloomberg U.S. Aggregate Bond Index. It is subject to market risk, credit risk, prepayment risk, and inflation risk. Its risk level is low to moderate, and its types of earnings is dependent upon the change in market prices and interest. Your C fund, this is, again, stocks of large U.S. companies like your Walmarts, Apples, Amazons. Its purpose is to match the performance of the S&P 500. It's subject to market risk and inflation risk, and it's got a risk level of medium, moderate, and the types of earnings is dependent upon the change in the market prices and the dividends. Moving on to your S funds, again, stocks in small to medium-sized companies that aren't outlined in C fund. Its purpose is to match the performance of the Dow Jones. It is subject to market risk and inflation risk, and its risk level is moderate to high, and the earnings are dependent upon the change in market prices and dividends. Going into the last two, your iFund, international stocks of more than 20 developed countries. Sorry if this is all crooked for you guys. But its purpose is to match the performance of the MSCI EAFE, so Europe, Australia, Far East Index. It is subject to market risk, currency risk, and inflation risk. Its risk level is moderate to high, and the types of earnings is dependent upon the change in market prices, the change in relative value of the U.S. currency, and of course dividends. And then lastly, the L fund, which will automatically be enrolled to from day one of you entering the service, is a percentage of investment into G, F, C, S, and the I funds. So L fund is a mix of all of these funds up here based on what the government says is best for you, and then your projected retirement date. Its purpose is to provide professionally diversified portfolios based on various time horizons. So what that means is when you're projected to retire, using the G, F, C, S, and I funds. It is its risk subjugation is exposed to all of the types of risk to which the individual TSP funds are exposed, but total risk is reduced through diversification among the 5 individual funds. Its risk level, it's pretty much asset allocation shifts as a target date approaches to reduce volatility or the risk level. So what that means is I don't know if it's a computer-generated AI. I don't know if it's an algorithm. I don't know if it's just a financial professional in the military somewhere. But what this means is once, let's say you're retiring in 2055, as you start getting closer and closer, and I do not know the timeline for that either, so I do apologize. But this L fund will automatically shift to whatever is going to be the lowest risk for you. In terms of moving the percentages of all these funds. So if this is 10 and this is 20 and this is 40 and then that's 10 and then 30 or whatever the rest is, it'll start shifting those percentages for you as you start to get closer to your retirement. And then the types of earnings for your L fund is a composite of earnings in the underlying funds. So it's just a mix of all the different funds. The last few things I'll go over, and I'm going to switch it off of video at least. Last few things I'll go over. With TSP, you can get a, I just read it too. Let me not lie to you guys real quick.
So real quick while he's looking, guys, the one thing to remember is that all of this is about you and your future, and the best people to make that decision is you and a certified financial planner. So there is a lot of opportunity for you to get screwed over if you ask the wrong people. Make sure that you're doing the right research and that you're speaking to the right people before you guys make any serious decisions. However, the TSP is such a wonderful program. I ended up having to I used it I luckily I was able to have it, and I pulled it out during some life emergency time about 15 years ago. So it was there for me as a thing. So it sticks with you for life, even if you don't stay in the entirety of your career.
And on top of that, when you're looking at civilian, not necessarily civilian, but other options showing some similar things like Vanguard index funds, they are frequently going to recommend you to take the TSP instead, because even though they may have similar yields as funds that invest across an entire index rather than individual companies, the fee structure for the TSP is so much more favorable for you as a service member. Like, you're not worried about all the different management fees that are included in having to have a managed fund. It's something I 100% recommend investing in, at least for the 5%, because that's a guaranteed 100% return, because Uncle Sam is matching said 5%.
Yep. And so the thing I found too that I was looking for that the TSP can also help you with, it can provide you a loan. However, just like Whiskey said, read the fine print, talk with a financial planner advisor, someone who truly knows what they're talking about. And it's all good to get advice from, mom, dad, your friends, your buddies, or whatever. My opinion to that is, are they financially where you want to be? And it's not to say don't listen to them at all, because, you know, I've made mistakes that I've definitely learned from. So I can say, hey, I made this mistake. Here's how I learned from it. And here's probably a better route in case you end up on the same path. You know, so everyone has stories like that where they can help. But don't let someone tell you, oh, you should invest, you know, start getting into Robinhood right now and do all this, you know, crazy stuff with all these stocks. You know, like, okay, let them go do their thing. You do your thing. It's whatever's best for you and then your family or eventual family at the end of the day. So truly be aware of that. But again, another one of the benefits that the TSP has is it can provide you a loan. But again, read that fine print and just make sure that that is something that you should do based off your situation. There is other things like a financial hardship that you can apply for that's outside of TSP, and that'll be through your chain. There is, if you're a first-term airman, there is an airman fund out there somewhere that your chain can also get you in contact with. But yeah. Hope that helps give you guys at least a little bit of an idea. Quick last little story that I can give to TSP stuff. So my cousin's actually in the Army right now, and let's see, I'm getting ready to start hitting about 3.5 years within the next 2 months. So I'm getting kind of close. He's been in maybe 2.5 years. And through what he's been doing with his TSP, last I heard from him, he had over $50,000 in his TSP. And he's only been in like 2.5 years-ish. So, I mean, I don't know what exactly he's doing, but you know how much money he's putting in. But he showed me the numbers too, and he definitely has the bank in there. So, you know, the TSP can be a big help for you. And if you do things right, and you know, don't just spend money out the wazoo, because now you're getting paid, and you know that paycheck's going to be coming regardless. You know, be wise with your money. Will be my last advice I can give.
And going
on,
sorry?
So back to you or Whiskey.
All right. I had another thing I wanted to throw in because I just remembered a bunch of you guys are family men. Please, please, please make sure to get all your family members enrolled in DEERS. And if you are not married to your significant other, you're basically single, as far as Uncle Sam is concerned. Because through enrollment, making sure that everything's tied into DEERS, that allows them to have the same access to TRICARE health insurance that you do, which means that the same health benefits that are extended to you as an active duty service member are extended to your family. Anything goes wrong, bring them to the hospital, and you're not going to be worrying too much about a bill for the hospital care or the pharmacy if it's through an on-base facility. But there are little details here and there, and it may vary based off of your duty station, whether or not you're Okonas, or in a remote location like you're in Afghanistan or something. So make sure to look into those for your particular situation. But please, if you do have family members, make sure that you get that squared away as soon as you get in. That way, any headache will be prevented if anything goes wrong while you're in service or while you're in a position to not really be able to interact with the system on their behalf. And that's pretty much it off head for us. Are there any questions?
All right,
sounds like
guys.
a resounding no.
It is a resounding no, and I'd like to thank Montana and SIG for taking the time to do this. It's a big deal for these are the things that like a lot of people don't understand. The benefits that you get from your time in the military, both during and post, are such a huge thing. So I want to make sure that at some point throughout the next 24 hours or so, y'all are thanking Montana and SIG. And as we are recording this, I am going to say that there will be a link in the show notes or the video description, whatever it is, to the Air Force Special Warfare Discord if you're seeing this on YouTube. But if there's no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and end the recorded part of it. Thanks again to Montana and SIG. And Hooyah Never Quit, motherfuckers. Thank you again to Montana and to Sigurd for doing their little bit there. if you like what you're seeing, please go ahead and subscribe. I'm going to try and post some more of these in the end so that we can get more information out to the operators wannabes out there. So thank you to everyone. Have a good night.